Hello, friends. Pastor Jeff here. It's my joy and privilege to introduce to you Noah Kruis, who is a connection of our church from many, many years ago. A scholarship was given in honor of two church members, the Millers, way back in 1986 at our 75th anniversary as a church. It was given to McCormick Seminary, and over the years, that scholarship supported various students. We were in touch with those students at times, less in touch at other times. But through a couple of friendships I have at McCormick, I reached out when I remembered we had this scholarship. Someone faintly told me about it 4 years ago when I started. But a friend of ours, a mutual friend of Noah's and mine, Veronica Johnson, helped connect us and just remind us of this connection we have to McCormick Seminary, its wonderful mission in training students and sending them out to be faithful embodiments of the gospel in this time and place. So Veronica connected Noah and me to our church again because he was the last recipient of this Wilmette Scholarship that's still being awarded today. And I had a chance to talk with Noah about a month ago and connect a little more, hear more of his story. And I thought it would just be delightful for you all to meet him in the context of a Zoom interview that we'll put on our YouTube channel, and hopeful for perhaps further connection, as Noah might be in Chicago someday, or we might have other opportunities to work with him in his current ministry context, which we'll hear more about. So Noah, just a couple questions for you. First, tell us more about your journey of faith, how you came to this place at working at Crossroads, attending McCormick, a bit about your family, whatever you wish to share. We'd love to hear more of your story.
Yeah, thanks for this opportunity. And I'm happy to do this in part out of just the deep gratitude I have for your congregation and your generosity, but also because of the connectedness we have through the body of Christ. And that's really valuable to me in so many ways. I'm a person who grew up in the church, another Reformed denomination, and grew up in Northwest New Mexico, the edge of the Navajo reservation, where I attended a Christian day school there, a school that actually my dad had attended himself. So my dad grew up in the same area. He is a physician. He and my mom are both physicians, and had made the choice to serve in an underserved area. So they work in, my dad worked in the Indian Health Services offices for a number of years, first as a substance abuse specialist, addressing the sort of pandemic of alcoholism on the reservation, or epidemic, I suppose is the more appropriate term. But my mom was a pediatrician. My dad later was an emergency room doctor. So I grew up with this model of faithful service in community. And it wasn't coincidence that my parents chose that area. As I mentioned before, my dad grew up there because his parents had been missionaries. They served on the reservation. They were they lived out and among the Navajo people, the Dene people, as they call themselves, and my grandfather would go and visit and evangelize to people, and so again, this sort of family tradition of service, of presence in spaces where there was a perceived need, and so I definitely grew up shaped by that idea of you are here to serve in the world and to see where there's need and address that need. I moved away from the Southwest for college and happened to land at Calvin College, then now Calvin University, denominational tie to that place. And Calvin at that time was working with Crossroads ministry, and so Crossroads is an organization founded in the church. Actually, in 1986 was when they began. So the same year as that scholarship was established. And so Crossroads has been doing this work in church and religious settings for many years. And at that time was working with my Christian college. And as a student who came from a place where I was surrounded by diversity. When I got to that predominantly white campus, I looked for opportunities to be in more diverse company, and through that participated in this Crossroads workshop about anti-racism. One of the features of which is a process of looking at American history with a lens to how that history is experienced by people of color. And one element of that history that I learned in that workshop was the history of residential schools, a history that I think, as we're recording this, is coming to the forefront as the bodies of many Indigenous children have been found on the campuses of residential schools in Canada, and now in the US, they're beginning to do some of these investigations as well. But the establishment of these residential schools was a partnership between the US federal government and church denominations with the purpose of teaching children, Indigenous children. And so you can hear in that the sort of good intentions. And yet there also was this underlying goal that was actually explicit from the very beginning of when the Carlisle Indian School was founded in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, to kill the Indian to save the man. This idea that Indigenous identity is incompatible with Christian identity, and therefore our effort to sort of again both save these people from this evangelical Christian perspective, as well as build a nation where whiteness is the norm, that there was this intentional assimilation and erasure of Indigenous communities. So I sat in this workshop as a first-year college student and realized the school that I had attended that I really appreciated was one of these residential schools that, and even through my years, I graduated from high school in 1999. And in that year, there were still residential students who were coming off the reservation and living there during the week. They would go home on weekends. But that was part of the history of the place that had formed me. And so that began what has been sort of in all my adulthood, this reckoning of how do I follow the person of Jesus Christ and yet own up to the history that I and my family and the church as a whole is a part of this really cultural genocide of eliminating and erasure. And so I've studied and I pursued things in learning about this history, and really felt this calling to get some theological, biblical grounding in this work so that I could do the work more deeply in churches. And so started attending seminary. My spouse at the time, who's still my spouse, but at the time, she said, we need to get out of the sort of bubble that we're in and learn in a different place. And I had a college classmate who had attended McCormick a couple of years ahead of me, and knew that he'd had a really positive experience, had similar passions for anti-racism. And so sort of on a whim, my family went to visit Chicago and met Veronica and saw the campus. We had 3 little kids at the time, so the idea of moving to a small apartment in Chicago was sort of daunting, but Veronica and the others in the McCormick community were very welcoming. We got to see not only the academic community at McCormick that was very intentionally diverse, very I could tell from that visit was going to be a space where I would learn new things, both from my classmates and from faculty that I wouldn't learn in the predominantly white spaces that I had been a part of primarily leading up to that. And we also got to see, at that time, McCormick owned apartment buildings, and we could see, hey, I think we can do this. We could fit our family of 5 in this 3-bedroom apartment for a couple of years. And there's an elementary school between the apartment building and the seminary that would look like it was going to be a good space for our children. So we were very interested. I had applied to one other institution and got admitted to both McCormick and this other institution. But the other institution said, you can come, here's what the full bill will be. No financial assistance. Whereas from McCormick, I received the generous Wilmette Scholarship that covered a majority of the tuition costs. And so that seemed, again, a way that God was just making a way for me and my family to do that. So I enrolled in 2015. We moved in the fall of 2015 and got situated. Really, really loved my time at McCormick, made really wonderful friendships. But I think one of the coolest pieces was reconnecting with Crossroads, who has a very active presence in the Chicago area. And I was able to actually do my field internship for McCormick with Crossroads in Chicago, which is called Chicago Regional Organizing for Antiracism. And so worked intentionally and worked with congregations and other religious spaces, seminaries, day schools, and so forth. And that has then evolved into now I'm a full part of the Crossroads staff and part of particularly our work in religious congregations and religious communities. And yeah, it's been quite the journey. Yeah. Sorry, it's a long.
Thank you, Noah. No, I so appreciate every bit of the story you just shared, and obviously there are more pieces to it. I know, and more chapters and more depth, but it's so compelling and a gift to hear you narrate part of that story and see God's providence and see God's goodness and see God's revelation too. When you talk about that moment of recognition, when you looked at the Carlisle, Pennsylvania school, the school you grew up in, and I certainly have similar moments of recognition. And oh, wow, look at the structure in which I was a part and had no idea. And how do I atone? How do I own up to, as you said, and do the work of building a world where God's dream comes true for all God's children. So we're so grateful to hear a bit more of your story. Know this won't be, the last time, but just a final question, Noah. How can we be praying for you and supporting you? We're trying as a church to deepen our ties to McCormick Seminary and other the Presbytery, other interfaith congregations with whom we have close relationship, but trying to be more connected as a connectional church. And so how can we be in prayer for you and supporting you in this season of your life and ministry?
Thanks so much for that. It's wonderful to feel that connection. I think, one thing that I continue to be learning in this work is that this is a journey without a clear destination, but it is the journey that matters. And so prayer for God's continued guidance and taking these steps into this work that is challenging, that is it gets really at the core of my identity as a person, as a Christian, as a Christ follower, and so that I think I would covet your congregation's prayers for my own journey, but also for the journey that Crossroads is on as an organization. I think one of the important lessons is this move from an individual commitment to a collective identity and collective commitment to using our power and leveraging that power in ways that changes. And even though we are an institution committed to anti-racism, we are also together learning all the time, and particularly for our work in the religious sector. The learnings and the work that we're doing, again, is coming up against a lot of really deeply felt, deeply held beliefs about who the church is and what is how we are good in the world, how we do good in the world. And I think many congregations come to us asking for learning about systemic racism, looking at the outside. And so the challenge that we have of working with congregations to look internally at how are we shaped by white supremacy in our theology, in our liturgy, in our outreach efforts, in our all of those things. It's really hard work, and we it's humbling work. And so would appreciate ongoing prayers for myself and for our whole team as we do that work in congregations and other religious communities.
Well, amen. You've got them. You've got them. You mentioned, I recall in our last conversation about a month ago, that obviously following the murder of George Floyd and all that occurred last year in the way of protest and demands for systemic change, obviously you were deluged with phone calls, with inquiries, and that's petered out a little bit, but you're still finding, it sounds like, a lot of engagement from the religious sector, and that's heartening to hear.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it's been a challenging year, but a good year for us to sort of refocus and attend to some of our own vision for what this work looks like. So there have been silver linings in the midst of the chaos and the confusion and the stress. But I think we're optimistic about the trajectory forward.
Well, thank you, Noah. May God bless you and strengthen you in every way in your work for Crossroads, as you seek to do that journeying work, more that than the destination, and certainly as you seek to confront your own ways in which you're engaging in both personal and communal sin. Our church certainly is on a similar path, probably much earlier in the stages. We formed a racial justice committee about a year ago, and have made some progress, I think, and yet have such a long way to go, and very much resonate with your metaphor of a journey and not a destination.
Absolutely.
That God is with us on. So
well, many blessings to you and your congregation as well as you engage that work and continue in ministry.
Thank you, Noah. Deep peace be with you. We'll be in touch and look forward to all that God is up to among you at Crossroads.
Thank you. Hope to meet you and your congregation in person soon. Blessings.
Peace to you.